Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm joined here by Dr. Jim. We're doing Freaky Friday a day early just because of scheduling reasons. So we're here to have a fun, ambling conversation about whatever comes up, about stuff and things. So
Yep.
good to see you, Professor. How are you?
Good to see you, sir. Doing well, man. Doing
Good.
well.
Show off your shirt there. What's that? That's Old Man Jiu-Jitsu?
Old man jiu-jitsu.
That's so funny. Is that from your gym or is that?
No, it's a brand, basically. I think you can find a lot of old man jiu-jitsu merch out there.
Before I'm sure these conversations always tend towards heavy philosophy, so I'd like to start off on some lighter notes. How's your training been going?
Good. It's funny. Last week it felt like I had forgotten how to do jiu-jitsu entirely, and now this week
Why?
I'm on.
Had you just been out of it for a while? Or?
No, I find it's like any other performance thing. Like there's you peak and then you crash for a little while, and you peak and you crash for a little while, and also like you're not the only one involved, right? So especially if you're training with the same people all the time, they figure your stuff out, and then you've got to you're in a constant arms race with your frenemies at the gym, right?
Yeah,
you really are. And yeah, so last week I felt like I had just I had like lost my jiu-jitsu brain entirely. And
it's amazing how that happens, right? Because it's sometimes not like, oh, I'm just down a little bit today. It's like, no, I'm a brain dead child today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now this week though, I've been on a tear, right? Absolute tear, And so what'll happen is, you'll have a couple good weeks, and then the brothers will figure you out again, and here we'll go again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I do.
I think it's fun. Yeah. And so
yeah, we had a good rolling session the other night. Instructor Ryan, who's our coach, he let Mira, Mira, my little 6-year-old, put him in a triangle choke. Just shouting the whole gym, I got him in a triangle choke.
Nice. That's a man of humility. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's a great coach,
and then he subbed her.
Yeah.
To be clear,
yeah.
To be clear, little girl, right?
But
yes, there's a guy I train with who's like, gosh, he's every bit of like, he's probably like, he's almost 30 years younger than I am. He's like a 20-year-old guy, and he's a purple belt, very good player. And this guy and I are like in a constant arms race, and he had been killing me for a while on just like one thing. And then I just made a little adjustment on just one little different cuff grip I'm making on his pants. We're in the gi.
Nice.
And it like completely shut down what he'd been doing to beat me, right?
Yeah.
But then we go no-gi, he's still absolutely murdering me on that because I can't make that cuff, right?
Wow.
And so he'll figure something out to keep me from making that cuff grip on his pants in the gi, and so then it'll flip, and then I'll have to figure out a new trick. And I just think it's fun because this is how you get better, right?
That's the game. Yeah, that is fun. Hey, a couple announcements before we dive in. This is live Q&A, so you guys can put anything you want in the chat box. Any topics are open. Anything you want to talk about, fair game. It's all fun. Doesn't mean you'll get good answers, but anything's allowed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't mean right.
So, few things I want to mention real quick. If you are not already subscribed to our Philosophy for the People channel, please do that, because I did sort of officially separate the channels. So there's a lot of action going on over there with Dr. Jim that just isn't happening on my original Pat Flynn channel anymore. So look for Philosophy for the People on YouTube. You'll see this haunting face that will be there, and you'll know it's the right channel.
What was the names that we our street names that we were using for a while there?
I'm T-Bone.
T-Bone, yeah.
I forget what
mine was. Yeah. T-Bone and the old man.
Yeah, you had one. It was a good.
I had one. It was a good one. Yeah.
My other alias. If anybody ever sees a paper published by Elmo Pipgrass,
yes,
you'll know who that is. I love that name. A couple of announcements. I had a great conversation with Mike Matthews again. So there's a new conversation that we had on his podcast. He's got if you're looking for like good fitness podcasts, Mike Matthews' Muscle for Life is really good. I just had a conversation there.
Nice.
Had a chat with the old Byzantine Scotist the other day, and I think I have another one going up with Catholic Answers this week. So I've been a busy boy on the podcast front. What about you, Jim? What do you?
I saw that John Buck is on in the audience right now, and the only thing I've done recently podcast wise outside of here is I was on the Dry Apologist recently with John Buck, talking about simulation hypothesis stuff. So I might refer the listener to the Dry Apologist to check that out.
Yeah, awesome. Sweet. I got Seneca here. Do you read much Seneca, Jim?
I
I've
do
been
not. The Stoics are a bit of a weak point for me.
Can I read a paragraph or two
Yeah,
to you
please
and
do.
just get your comments
Do
on
it.
it?
Get it.
We've been doing kind of a mini Seneca series behind the scene here. And I've always enjoyed reading the Stoics and Seneca.
Mhm.
They were something of a bridge to me to other philosophers, which seems to be a common theme these
Yeah.
days. Seems like Stoicism is kind of dragging a lot of people out of a lived nihilism in our culture towards, I guess more traditional ways of thinking. I don't know if you've noticed that. I think that I've seen that happen.
Yep.
He wants to talk. I'd be curious your thoughts on this, and then we'll take some questions. He wants to talk about what he thinks is the difference between wisdom and philosophy.
Sure.
It's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he says this, and then we'll get the professor's thoughts. Wisdom is the perfect good of the human mind. Philosophy, love of wisdom and progress towards it. Philosophy is objective. Wisdom is attainment. The meaning of philosophy is clear from its derivation, which indicates love of wisdom. One definition of wisdom is knowledge of things divine and human. Another is knowledge of things divine and human and their causes. To me, the definition, the addition seems superfluous because the causes of things divine and human are part of the divine. Anyway, he goes on, but that's kind of the gist of it. What do you think of how Seneca's thinking there? Do you
Yeah.
like
I mean,
that?
I think 100%. I mean, the guy that we most associate with the founding of I hate to even use the word discipline, right? I like lifestyle better, but Socrates, claimed to be, a philosopher in as much as he didn't know a darn thing, but really wished he did, right? That yearned for it, right? And it's all over Plato, where, like the philosopher is spelled out as a kind of, as a lover, and literally in the erotic sense, like love of wisdom in an erotic sense, right? That you have this all over the Platonic dialogues. He has an erotic desire to get to wisdom, to get to wisdom, to get to wisdom, right? And so, yeah, I like that, right? Like philosophy, like a lot of people, like you'll get this, people ask you, what does philosophy say about this, right? As if philosophy is this like completed project, right? Or even it we might overestimate this again, maybe again stuff we're going to talk about today too, is like, what does science say about something? Well, that sort of assumes that science is a completed project,
Yeah.
right? Now, at least you could say
Mhm.
there's like a consensus, a going consensus in science, something like that, right? Whereas like we don't get like the name science doesn't derive from like the desire or the lust for knowledge of nature, right? You know what I mean? Like, whereas the name philosophy, like etymologically, as Seneca points out there, is derived from this desire to know, not necessarily knowing. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think yeah, increasingly the older I get, right, the more I see philosophy as a lifestyle, um, that is ordered to attempting, ever striving for wisdom, and it doesn't necessarily mean one has it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You brought up a theme we wanted to discuss briefly before
yeah.
getting to
The
the
questions, yeah,
question. So I see lots
yeah.
of good questions coming in. Keep them coming. Give us like 5 to 10 minutes. We'll start answering as many as we can. Jim, we started talking behind the
As
scenes
many as we
yesterday.
want.
As many as we
As we
want.
want. Be
Let's be
clear, yeah.
clear who's in
Be
charge
clear,
here.
yeah, yeah.
So we started talking yesterday, as we often. Sometimes the best conversations on this podcast actually happen after we
Yeah,
close the stream, which is
right.
always a shame, but that's how it
Yeah,
goes. And then we're like, oh, we should talk about that next time we actually do the podcast. So
yeah,
remind us what that conversation was and what was important about it and
yeah.
how it can help people with critical thinking.
Yeah. So I guess really the context for it is this didn't start over the last 2 years with the onset of the virus that we dare not speak its name. Okay. But
Not if we want
but
to stay on YouTube.
I mean, it, like people have for years, like you've seen this for years and years. Well, I've saw a study that, right, and then follow, without really any reference or anything. I saw a study that shows, either like, undermining some hated position or supporting your own cherished position, right?
Right.
Okay, it's a study has shown, or a study. I mean, careful with shown, right? A study has shown. Like I saw a study that supports whatever. Okay, and I think a lot of that betrays a misunderstanding of just what inductive reasoning is, right?
Yeah.
Or what it means to even appeal to scientific studies. Okay.
So
Yeah.
let's give an example of this that
Yeah.
all of them are going to be controversial because everybody's
Yeah.
got their sacred cow that they don't want
Yeah.
slaughtered. But I think a relatively tame one would be, and of interest to people here, would be in the nutritional sciences, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's sort of a prevailing consensus in nutritional science that's what really fundamentally matters is sort of caloric intake and outtake.
Yep.
And what isn't so important is whether you're keto or vegan or anything
Yep.
like that, right?
Yep.
Now, look, there's a lot of people who want to take down that sort of prevailing. I'm hesitant to call it a dogma, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so you have many people out there saying, no, this model is all wrong, or at least it's seriously misleading
Yeah.
or incomplete. And they will, of course, have their, I think it's fair to call them anomalies, right?
Yeah.
And when we think about scientific reasoning and inductive reasoning, and when we should have confidence in a sort of scientific endeavor, we should understand that if I guess a theory covers a wide enough range, it's always going to have anomalies, right? Almost, yeah. But if not always, then in all the cases I know of, anyways, right? It's always going to have anomalies, but we don't think that it's reasonable to think that those anomalies, like, we should kind of be anti-skeptical about those anomalies, right? They shouldn't necessarily overturn the entire theory just because there's anomalies, right? So
the way I present this to my sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The way I present this to my students is every inductive argument has counterexamples.
Yeah.
Okay, like they're like to say the argument is inductively cogent as opposed to deductively valid is to admit, yeah, that we could suffer counterexamples wherein the premises of this argument are true and the conclusion turns out false, right?
Yep.
It's just that we're saying if it's induction, those will be relatively rare or maybe even extremely rare compared to the cases where the premises are true and the conclusion is true also, right?
Now, we have to be careful because there are cases where one counterexample does deal death to the theory, right? Think of like black swan type of stuff.
Yeah.
However, it's when it comes to scientific methodology, a lot of the proposed counterexamples are usually not so cut and dry as a black swan, right?
Because I think a lot of times let me use the example that we in our conversation that got it going, I think, and then we can go back to the nutrition thing because I think this might be clearer, right? Is because a lot of times what you have is you have a bait and switch, not intentionally, but there's a bait and switch in terms of the method of the studies. Okay, so the example that got us talking about this was about the Shroud of Turin, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And for years and years, there had been like talk that had been debunked because of carbon dating, right? And I know there's worries about like whether the piece that was carbon dated or what have you was was actually a patch as opposed to an original piece. But let's just leave all that aside. We're not trying to make a point of the Shroud of Turin. We're trying to make a point about method.
Just using an example about method, right?
And let's suppose there had been like 3 carbon dates of the Shroud of Turin, and they all showed that it was much later than the 1st century Palestine. I don't know if that's true. I'm not okay. I'm making that up.
It's just a hypothetical.
Hypothetical, right? Okay.
Don't get crazy on us.
I know there's like some guy with the Shroud of Turin tattoo that's about to like freak out or something, right? Okay.
They're gonna go start training jujitsu just so they can take you down.
Yeah. Brilliant. Anyway, but then on the other side, then this did happen, that there was some sort of study done in the Shroud that showed that there's like pollen spores in there that, in all likelihood came from 1st century Palestine. So that's going to push your date way back. Okay. Now, here's the stipulation though, and you will see this, is people will say, without looking at all the details, they'll say, well, look, no, that study shows the Shroud of Turin was indeed, crafted in 1st century Palestine and thereby verifies the whole thing. Okay. Here's my worry about this kind of reasoning. And once again, it's not about the Shroud. I think you see this all over the place. I can even give an example where you and I had to go around on this too, right?
Yep.
Well, you've got, say, 3 studies with the carbon dating. And okay, those are empirical studies. So there's a margin of error there. Okay. Let's say the margin of error is pretty low. Okay. And it's even lower that all 3 of them are missing it. Okay. So if you start like multiplying the probability, it's going to go down, 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 down. Okay. And let's say you've got your pollen spore study. That too has a margin of error. Okay. So now you've got 2 seemingly contrary conclusions, okay, but done by 2 different methods, right? And now the question is what is more likely, that the one study hit a low threshold, like a low probability margin of error, or the other 3 all hit a low probability margin of error, right? Well, you got to say it's more likely that the one hit the low probability margin of error than the other 3. Do you see that? Okay. So to say that somehow that undermines a consensus is to actually, that is cherry picking, right?
Yes, right.
You know what I mean? Okay, and even if like you had 3 carbon dating studies and then a 4th, right, that showed something contrary, once again, you got to ask what's more likely, right? That those 3 all hit the margin of error or that one did.
Yes,
okay.
right.
Now, what should happen is when you get these contrary things, okay, that then does call for further study, right? Okay, because now you got a different method showing different things, and now we have to ask: is there a way can we repeat the one, right, to show that it's happening again and again and again?
Yeah.
And then moreover, we have to look for an overarching way to make sense of all this data. Do you see that? Okay.
Yes.
And I think you see this a lot, right? Okay, well, I got a study that shows, carbohydrates are like the cause of obesity, right? Or a cause of obesity. Yeah, but there's a different method going on there, and I have to ask myself, like, what's the likelihood, right? That method, like just that one study fell into the margin of error. We just got an unlucky sample, although very unlikely that we would be that unlucky, but it can happen, right? We got an unlucky sample in that study, or we got unlucky in all these other ones.
Yeah.
Well, the probability is going to weigh in the other side, but it does open the question of further investigation, but it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't even really strongly support anything.
Right. And so what we're trying to do here is we're not trying to like settle these debates. We're trying to help people be more rational in their adjudication, right? Because rationality isn't about being correct all the time.
Yeah.
It's about doing the best with what you have, so it's more likely that you'll be correct than not, right? And this is just a mistake that that we see happening in many different spheres. I think nutritional science is a really interesting one because if people because it's just like keto is really popular right now. This is a huge part of the debate is right that the sort of mainstream guys, people can listen to a debate of Stephen Goyenet and Gary Taubes on this. Taubes is kind of saying, look, the mainstream view is totally false. And he's got his, what Stephen will say are anomalies, right? But Stephen will say, look, these are anomalies, right? We have all this overwhelming other data. So Taubes has sort of a burden there.
Yeah.
That, and again, I haven't followed this up too much to see if he has or has not substantiated this burden, but he would really have to show that like there's a completely false operative paradigm, right, underneath Goyenet's or the mainstream guys, just way of thinking about this altogether, which he has tried to indicate before. I don't think he indicated all that well. But yeah, I think nutritional science is certainly ripe with this type of whatever we want to call it, the cherry picking fallacy. I like anomaly mongering. I think that's kind of a fun way to think about it, right? So yeah, what's the final word on that? And then we'll take some...
or just like the example, from the virus that we dare not mention its name,
right?
I think like it was when I'm sorry to forget his name, but our friend from Italy, that was on the show.
Oh, Eduardo, yes.
Eduardo, yeah. So we were talking with Eduardo once about these issues, and like I had appealed to studies that were like showing like maybe the vaccine is within like an acceptable risk level, and you had pointed out the study in the Lancet, right? That had shown maybe not, right? Okay, I think that was the issue.
I think
right?
he did. I've been pretty hands off on the back stuff.
Because you got a podcast to maintain.
I'm trying to get canceled, right? And like just like frankly, like that wasn't an issue that I looked deeply into. Right?
Yeah, no, same here. I didn't know terribly deeply, and I'm not trying to make a point about this, but the first order issue. But the point there is like, you could have a published study that is like perfectly well conducted that shows something absolutely contrary to like what a bunch of other published studies show, right? Yeah. But then you have to ask yourself, is that because like you could have a perfectly rigorous study that turns out to be unlucky, right? And so what's more likely, like that one is unlucky, or all these other ones are like unlucky? Do you know what I mean? Or like a significant subset of them is unlucky, right? And once again, this is the point of why repeatability is so important in these kinds of issues. Like, okay, can we do that study again and again and again and again? And then we start thinking, no, we weren't just unlucky the first time.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think a lot of time, like what goes on with a lot of this stuff is people are like implicitly confusing deduction with induction. Right.
Yes. Right.
Right. Like if I can just show you one case where the premises are true and the conclusion is false, although that's not explicitly what they're thinking, but I think it's implicitly what's going on there, then that just shows the whole thing falls out. No, we admit luck plays a role in this, and now we got to like repeat, but we're not patient enough to wait. And in some cases, we don't have the luxury.
We don't have the we just don't have the luxury, right?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, I hope that's helpful to people. We thought it was interesting and important enough to just kick the conversation off with. So let's take some.
Well, and part of what we're about here is like be, not winning but being reasonable, right?
And I think that's important to try and get across. Okay, let's see what's going on here in the happen and party section. Haley says, "Hello, everybody. I was listening to Dr. Sijuwati." Yeah, great guy. I was revisiting one of his papers for an article I'm thinking about writing. Jim, after our long conversation yesterday, I took some of your advice, but then had an idea for another article where I want to make the case. How up are you on the sort of contemporary research of grounding in metaphysics?
Not at all.
I'm interested in doing an article of testing the hypothesis of whether we should think of grounding as a form of essentially subordinated causal series, because this is a big sort of debate in the grounding literature, whether we should think of grounding as causation or not. And some people say yes, other people say no. And I want to say, well, if you're willing to think of it as causation, there might be reason. This is the thing. To think it maps on pretty well with how Aquinas and Scotus and all these guys thought about essentially subordinated causal series. Okay. So I've been the whole point of that is just to say I've been revisiting some of Sijuwati's work on that because he's got some cool stuff on that.
But once again, though, I think what you're doing there sounds far too interesting to get published.
Yeah, right. It's just too novel. All right, you have
to do something utterly pedestrian and boring.
Yeah, and with a polemical target in mind. Right. Parker says, do you guys think that, all right, we're going to take a hard turn here. Do you guys think that hard forms of determinism are incompatible with consciousness? That is, would we even be able to be conscious in the way we are if hard determinism were the case? Cheers. Jim, take the first whack at this one.
Yeah, I don't see any connection between the issues there. I mean, let's see what you mean by conscious in the way we are, meaning conscious including with consciousness, like a sense of agency, and the agency would actually be effective in some way, then I could see a connection. But I don't see a connection between just whether or not there's hard determinism operative in nature and whether there are conscious beings at all. Right now, we could wonder why, if you've got hard determinism, like consciousness, would play an evolutionary role and all that. Okay, but I don't think in principle, just to say, like on Leibnizian ground, like Leibnizian determinism, right, or something like that, that would somehow undermine the very idea that there are conscious entities, because their conscious entities could just be determined by prior causes too, on that kind of model.
Yeah, and if you take like a theological determinism, that would seem to be compatible. So I'm with you there. I would say certainly if I think you're a reductive physicalist and hard determinist, I don't see why consciousness would serve any evolutionary function at that point, right? Or at least I think it'd be far less probable. But I think that the main incompatibility is not between consciousness, but rational agency.
So if you're a reductivist, like literally like a type identity theorist, well then I think you don't have a problem, because you're like, what you're saying is like the conscious state just is the brain state. Now help yourself to think that doesn't make sense, right? But if you're saying the conscious state just is the brain state, well then the conscious state does plenty of causal work, because
it's just identical to the brain
because
state,
events and brains do work. So I think this actually
it's good
pushes some people to like want to like kind of resurrect kind of more robust versions of identity theory, because it does answer this question, like, well, why the hell would you have conscious animals in the first place, right? Because the nervous system just is identical with the consciousness, right?
So I think the issue is still the classic one, not necessarily with consciousness, but agency. Good question. Let's keep scrolling up here. Jan says, why is a theory with a smaller number of brute facts preferable over a theory with more brute facts? Why does simplicity of a theory matter? Well, generally, when we think of like the sort of theoretical virtues, the idea supporting simplicity is that the less basic components you have, it seems like the fewer ways a theory could go wrong, right? So it's gonna be sort of internally more probable. other considerations equal, right? So it's always has to be balanced against other considerations. That's different than considering brute facts. However, those are distinct things. I don't think any theory with brute facts is acceptable, whether there's few or many, because I think once you let like a little bruteness in, it's just catastrophic at that point. So you're kind of, I think he's kind of thinking of Sweet Richard, the way Sweet Richard thinks about arguing for the existence of. Is it okay if we call him Sweet Richard?
I don't care. Yeah, I mean,
he's going to say we should prefer sort of theism over naturalism because we can just get to fewer brute facts, right? And look, I have great respect for Richard Swinburne, and I think his work is marvelous in many ways, but I part ways with him strongly there. I think we need to try and get brute facts down to zero. I've offered ways of thinking about how to do that now with classical theism, and I think you can do that because I think once you kind of let brute facts in anywhere, you are just going to suffer all sorts of skeptical situations and scenarios. So, yeah, I mean, to my mind, I guess that's how I think about brute facts. Jim, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that or not.
Well, I want to leave aside brute facts because I don't have anything to add on that. I agree with you, but if it's the simplicity thing, right? Like, why go with fewer rather than more? I think one might make a case, like the more claims you have in your theory, right, that cannot be reduced or explained by other claims, right, the more you're going to have to dump into your probability calculation if you want to think about it this way. And I keep promising myself I will stop thinking of things this way. But if you want to think about it this way,
here we go again.
Yeah, the more claims I know, damn it, they pull me back in. The more claims you make like that, my understanding of the mathematics, I would be happy to be corrected on this, is it's going to take the overall probability of the theory down. Okay. All right. Now, I think, I'm not sure. That being said, I am very moved by things like Kant's third critique that point out, and like some of like even Putnam will bring this up, is like there is not a damn good reason on the side of reason to think that the world has to be simpler rather than more complex. There is no reason to think that up front. And so it seems that we have an aesthetic attraction to this sort of thing, okay, but it doesn't actually, there's no reason that can be given for it, right? Do you see what I mean? And even if you want to say like the probability theory does that, well, is that probability theory a reflection of like how we have to structure the world to make sense of it, or is it like the way things actually have to be? Do you see what I mean? Because there's so many issues and like the subjectivities of probabilities and all that, right?
Yeah.
And so like I don't think, if you're looking for like, this is why I don't particularly like simplicity arguments, right? Unless we're willing to grant there's a great big mystery as to why we would expect the universe to be simpler rather than more complex in the first place, which I think then if you're going to say, well, no, we're going to assume the universe is simple as if somebody smart were running it, you've now like actually
you got theism in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, like, this is sort of Kant's point. He's going to say it's not a proof of theism, but it's showing like you're operating as if the universe is run by somebody smart.
Right. Yeah. What's grounding that expectation? Right.
What's grounding that expectation? Right. And Kant won't tell you that he's got a good account of that, but he will say like there is a purposeless purposiveness to things. Like we don't necessarily know what the purpose of things are, but we treat it as if somebody has set it up. Right.
Yes.
And like if somebody set it up, like think of like, and he's taking this from Leibniz, then you would like say, what's the engineering principle behind it? And good engineering is going to like go for like, an economy of means to ends. Right. And so you're going to expect simplicity. Right.
Yeah.
But so we have like a taste to see things that way is how Kant puts it. Right. And so once again, it's not a proof, but I think the very fact that you're comparing probabilities or you're comparing theories based on simplicity, that I think is a score for the theist.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. You brought that point up and expanded a bit in our conversation with John DeRosa. So if people want to hunt down that line of thought a little bit more, go check out the chat we did with DeRosa on his podcast, which was also aired on ours. Just one quick.
Kind of a big game changer thing for me when I read that. Yeah.
Go Kant. Let's do a quick follow-up. John Buck says, I think Swinburne's view actually isn't that bad once you realize that he's expanding metaphysical possibility all the way out to logical possibility. Is that what Swinburne's doing?
I would take John's word for but I have
Um,
not looked at that stuff in forever.
no,
Yeah.
John strikes me as an honest guy. I know that Swinburne. The problem I see it is Swinburne's philosophy of God, right? So he denies classical theism. He denies divine simplicity. He denies divine
Yeah.
eternality, or at least he used to. I know now he became Eastern Orthodox, so maybe he's changed on these things. But by the
You might
time
might have to, right? Yeah.
yeah, and then you just have sort of bruteness. You have brute compositeness in God, right? Like the way some of these thinkers think about God is like you have this part of God that has to be together with this part because you don't have absolute simplicity. And now you just have something that is brute. It seems to cry out for an explanation, but it has no further explanation, right?
Yeah.
Not even an internal explanation, right?
Yeah.
So if we're trying to get a fundamental theory that's going to bring brute facts to, and then why does that matter? Well, then at that point, the skeptic can just say, well, look, I'm just going to scoot the brute window up to the universe, right? Right? If you have stuff that is inexplicable in your worldview, I'm just gonna say, yeah, I have that too, and now I'm gonna win out on these other criteria or something. And then you just kind of get in this theoretical virtues arms race, right? That just goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, like endlessly and annoyingly. Whereas the classical theist is committed to no, reality is fully, completely intelligible. We might not be able to grasp the explanation, but there is, in principle, a completely self-explanatory fact, which is God, and only something of a very special sort of nature could possibly be a self-explanatory fact. It's going to have to be something that is not composite, that is not qualitatively finite, that is purely actual, right? That's the only way that we're going to have like something that could actually get brute facts down to zero, right? At least it stands as a plausible candidate to do
Right.
it. Again, we don't grasp the essence of God, so like we can't just see it, right? But like if anything could do it, it seems like it would have to be this sort of thing. And as soon as you deny that, like Swinburne does, I think that's just hugely like people don't appreciate, if you haven't like been in the world of traditional metaphysics, like how much rides on divine simplicity. I think this is like this crusty old theory of like medieval theologians and Plotinus, like, oh, that sounds weird. Let's get rid of that, right? But they don't realize there's some enormous consequences bound up with this.
Yeah, it seems, and once again, I haven't read a lot of these people, but it seems it's sort of motivated. It's thought to be motivated by like entirely theological concerns, right? When in fact, what's motivating divine simplicity, going back to Aristotle, are metaphysical concerns, right?
Yeah.
Like independent of theology, right?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like Aristotle would say, I got myself into theology to solve these problems, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Okay. Very good. All right. Let's, Jim, feel free to grab any
Sure,
questions
sure.
that interest you as well here. Don't let me hog the party.
Let's see. There was something from Andrew. Yeah. So Andrew, our guy Andrew, had a question about Kant's third critique. So since we're on that, do you mind if I go back to that?
Yeah, please do it. Yeah.
So Andrew says, often in conversation about aesthetics, one comes across the term disinterestedness. I believe it arose from Kant's third critique, but what does it mean? I'm never able to grasp it. Okay. Yeah, so it does indeed arise. I don't know if it arose there, but certainly Kant uses it. I'd be surprised if it didn't arise there, because it's sort of an application of some Kantian, like basically Kantian ethical moral notions to his aesthetics, right? But what Kant thinks, so Kant wants to distinguish the experience of something as beautiful from the experience of something as merely pleasant. Okay. Like he says, they're both pleasing. Okay. But what is the difference between something that is pleasing as beautiful and just merely pleasing as in like, ooh, tastes like chocolate, feels like sex. Okay. You see that? Right. And he thinks there's something more. Kant is in a sense a subjectivist about beauty. But he thinks there's more going on there than just merely, it like makes me twitch. Okay. And what he thinks is going on there is like, if you like have like a visual experience of, like the Reese's peanut butter cups, right? And you walk over there and the Reese's peanut butter cup was, like you'd been drinking too much cough syrup and there really was no Reese's peanut butter cup sitting on the counter, right? You're disappointed because it doesn't actually exist. Okay. All right. But let's say And so like like the experience would be less pleasing. It would, like, whether or not the Reese's peanut butter cup exists makes a difference for how pleasing the experience is. There'd be a frustration if it didn't exist. Okay. Whereas Kant thinks if you have an experience of beauty, you are disinterested in whether there is any object corresponding to the image that you're experiencing. Okay, so like if you see a painting of I use the example of Vermeer's Girl with the Pearl Earring, all right, which is absolutely, like, I defy anyone to look at that painting and not say that woman is gorgeous or girl is gorgeous. Okay. And there's all sorts of controversy over like whether that woman really exists or who was it and all this. So I use this painting to make the point, right? And I tell my students, like, I show them that painting and I say, okay, if it turned out that there was no such woman and this was merely a figment of Vermeer's imagination, would that detract from the attractiveness of the painting, right? And Kant would say, if you can say no to that, then you experienced it as an attraction of beauty and not merely lust, right? Because you don't actually care whether the object exists. You're not trying to possess something. It is just purely the experience of it. Do you see that? Okay. And so what Kant means by disinterested in terms of the experience of beauty is that you have no interest in the object that may or may not be behind the image as actually existing. The object is pleased, or the image is pleasing in and of itself, independently of anything distinct from it. Okay. And it literally, he's giving you a deontological aesthetic here, right? In the same way he gives you a deontological ethic. It doesn't matter if, like, my act of will makes a difference out external to the act of will. It matters to the act of will. And likewise, he's saying about the aesthetic experience. If it is a bona fide experience of the beautiful, you don't care whether the thing actually exists.
There you go. Right. Satisfied with that answer, gentle listener? We hope so. Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff. We will eventually be doing something on Kant, I imagine, on our philosophy people channel. All right, let's do this one. Jorgroff, if I'm pronouncing that right, which I'm almost certainly not, says, I'm passing my classical metaphysics exam the day after tomorrow. With what unorthodox reads of Plato and Aristotle can I surprise my professor? I mean, there's the unorthodox read of Plato's epistemology, not as sort of knowledge as pre-existing in a soul that pre-exists the body, but as knowledge as something rather implicit in your back pocket that you kind of like fill out in terms of recollection. That's one of the, I guess, unorthodox positions with Plato's epistemology, which I've become increasingly attracted to over time with not just conversations with you, Jim, but friend Dr. Michael Torre argues pretty vigorously for that interpretation, because he says if you read Phaedo, you have to immediately go and read Meno, right? Yeah. to try and see how that is a plausible read. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh gosh, I mean, if you really want a good one, I just watched a very interesting podcast yesterday, with featuring a guy named, I actually have it right here in front of me, Grimes, Grimes, where he's talking about what seems to be, in his view, the pretty clear-cut influence of hallucinogenic plants on Plato and Aristotle. It's certainly Plato, right? And I don't think this is meritless, actually. Okay, I don't think it is meritless. Okay, so if you want to shock someone, drop that on your comps. Like, okay,
depends. I mean, like, what kind of grade are you trying to get, right?
Yeah, exactly. But
moreover, what kind of professor are we dealing with? Yeah.
Moreover, I'm gonna make okay. So one, I think CDC Reeves' book Aristotle, a quick immersion, is a good place to get heterodox views of what Aristotle's up to and a lot of stuff, in terms of like how well he would fit into like what we think of as like the scholastic picture. Okay, so I think Reeves's Aristotle is ill-behaved in some ways for the scholastic. So if your readers are scholastics, Reeves might help you offend them. Okay. Another place to look here, and I'm gonna botch the guy's name because I'm not like a legitimate professional academic, really. There's a book that came out just this last year on it's Heidegger, Plato, and Mortality. Okay. And there is a very, very cool reading of Plato, especially in the Phaedo in there that I think it kind of gels a lot of stuff I've thought about Plato for a while, but this guy, is doing a much better job of it. So I would check that out too if you want a more nuanced, complicating picture of Plato. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, there you go. Let us
Because like,
know how that
one
turns
of the
out for
things
you.
that's pointed out in that book is like if you look at the Phaedo, right, Socrates never actually owns the story about the immortality of the soul. It's always they say this, they say this, it has been said, it has been said, and he makes jokes about it too. Well, I guess the soul is separate from the body unless the wind is blowing that day or something like that. So and he points out other things about in the Timaeus, this whole account of the demiurge, right? Well, Socrates is sleeping off a hangover the whole time. Like Plato goes out of his way to say, like, because it's the day after the Republic, he's hungover. He walks back to Athens, he gets stuck in another conversation, and he goes to sleep and wakes up when Timaeus is done talking. Right. So to what degree is Plato owning that account? That's an interesting question, right? So,
It is indeed.
yeah.
Let's take a fitness one here from Horseman. Buddy Horseman says, any injuries accumulated during the years? Yeah, you go first, Jim.
Yeah,
What do you got? What are you dealing with these days?
I occasionally get some like knee swelling from overuse, right? But basically, if I don't run, it's not a problem. Okay,
Yeah.
I think if I weren't, because jujitsu does like ask a lot of your knees in some ways. It's not impact, but you spend a lot of time kneeling, right? And like in deep bent positions, stuff like that. So I found for me, right, that it seems like running and jujitsu do not mix. Okay. But I really love me some running, and sometimes I'll go on a running jag, and almost inevitably it ends in like a swollen knee. Okay.
Yeah.
But then it's just, quit running, take it easy in the mat, ice, rest, wear a brace for a week, and then it's good as new.
Right.
Other than that, I have no accumulated injuries, right? I'm actually, I think, better off orthopedically right now than I was when I was in my 20s.
Which is awesome because you've got a long athletic background. You've done a lot of different activities, powerlifting, martial arts, all of that. So that's actually quite impressive. Yeah.
And basically, when I cut out the powerlifting shit is when all that got better. So
yeah, powerlifting is hard on the body, man. I remember I got to around like 2.5 body weight deadlift, and I was really already starting to feel it. I'm like, you know what? That's good enough for me, right? First off, Pat Flynn's got no delusions he's ever going to do well in a powerlifting meet comp to begin with, right? I mean, look at me, right? Strong enough is strong. Like, it's good to be able to say when strong enough is strong enough and move on, and to realize, because I've had enough friends and coaches over the years that, like, dang, man, like one of my the coaches I had in college was a powerlifting coach, and the dude was pretty much in a freaking wheelchair in like his late 40s, and it's like, yeah, it's just not worth that for me. And obviously that's not everybody, but there's a lot of people like that.
Dave Tate has written some stuff about this, right? Now, of course, with Dave Tate, this is not a man who approached the sport with any moderation whatsoever, right? It was like, take all the drugs you could get your hands on that would help, and like use all the assistance gear that you can get your hands on,
all in all the way,
all in all the way. And my understanding is that, I don't know if it's still true now, but by the time that guy got done with powerlifting, he was like a near invalid. Like, he was a mess, and like painkillers and all that stuff going on, right? And I don't know about this, okay, but I used like bench shirts, squat suits, stuff pretty sparingly in powerlifting. And I have no idea if this is a thing. It just was my kind of intuitive fear about this. It just seemed to me, when you start like using this gear that is going to like load your body far beyond what you could do under your own steam. I'm not, and geared powerlifting is a sport of its own, but okay, I'm not saying you're not actually lifting weight. Be careful, right? Okay. But that just seemed to me like a really bad idea. Like, I'm putting my body under strains it would not be able to handle without this piece of equipment. All right. I'm not saying it's cheating in terms of how much you can lift. That just seemed like a bad idea to me.
Just seemed like it might be inviting some trouble, right?
Inviting some trouble, right? And so like I played around with the bench shirt thing a little bit and the squat suit thing a little bit, and then just finally found it just made the experience of lifting really freaking unpleasant, right? And two, it just seemed to me like, man, if like if my body can't really do this, like what kind of strain am I putting on myself, et cetera, right? So I'm not anti-powerlifting, but I got to where I felt like I had achieved goals that I wanted and got the hell out of it.
And then got out. Yeah, that's a good. I think that's a good mindset for a lot of people to have, especially if you're like me, and like there's just like no realistic chance that you're going to be competing with a Dave Tate, no matter how hard you try. Right. That's why I wrote a book on generalism, not hyper specialization.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the thing with powerlifting too, and once again, I'd be happy to be corrected by this, but like, are you going to make forever progress in that sport? It seems at some point you're going to like reach your genetic potential, right? And even you're going to reach your genetic potential with the drugs, right? If that's your jam, okay. And so then, like, I think if you can't like psychologically separate yourself and say I can powerlift and still be like a decent man, right? Which I think is a problem with a lot of people, right? Then you're going to like keep pushing for like these little tiny gains, right? And so now the risk to achievement reward is going to get really upside down, and you're going to get hurt.
That's right. Yeah.
So, that's one of the things I worry about, right? I was actually just talking to someone the other day about like how deeply wrapped up so many men's like self-esteem with is like on how much they can bench press, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And if it sounds like if they can't bench press anymore, it's like they're lost. And they're
time to get religion, guys.
Yeah. and they're going to keep hurting themselves, right? And now, and just like you look at something like, I hate to, I don't hate it. This is one reason why I do it, right? Is like, look at like jujitsu. Like there's no like absolute upper bound of how good you can get at this without getting hurt. Right. Do you know what I mean? Or like archery, I suspect is similar, right? Or like something more like a martial art, right? Is going to give you lifelong, ever deeper improvement possibilities, right? Without wrecking you. Or I'd say in jiu-jitsu case, wrecking you less, because it will add up, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking to a man who promotes generalism here, so you're gonna get nothing but agreement, right? Yeah. So what about me? I probably should answer this. No, I got some tweaks here and there. I got some shoulder tweaks, a little. In fact, probably the worst injury I had was not from lifting or martial arts. It was actually from a stupid photo shoot I had to do a photo shoot for one of my books, and they sent the crew in, and I was actually doing some like high kicks, and I didn't warm up before I did a Taekwondo high kick, and they just like exploded my left hamstring.
So I pictured it more like a rock band album cover. You got like a bikini girl on your shoulders, and that's
yeah, and that did it. No, I wish that would have been a lot cooler, man.
Yeah,
instead of, I just thought I was hot stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna go through like I think it was like a scissor kick or something.
Yeah,
and just like pop, 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 pop. I'm like, oh no, and then
I was settled in your neck.
No, hamstring.
Hamstring, yeah.
And yeah, I was out for like a good, like, I don't know, 5-6 months, and it still needs a lot of attention now. So that's probably the worst thing I have, but it's not that bad. It's not.
I don't like that at all. So I was starting to feel like my neck was going to get bad from jiu-jitsu, and I just added some like pretty basic mobility stuff every morning, just like rotating the neck like that, and this feels great, right?
Yeah.
Feels great. Yeah.
I saw somebody had a question for you, Jim. If you, yeah, here it is. Does Jim use the massage gun, and which massage gun did you pick up recently?
Yeah, I have not used a massage gun yet, but like Pat's been nagging me to get into it, and I have some buddies who use it. So
I'm a big advocate now, man. I had it in the car with me today after the gym, and my wife was getting a little annoyed.
Yeah, right.
Turn that stupid thing off, right?
She's gonna like accuse you of recreational massage gun use.
Yeah, she's like, I don't know how I feel about this thing being a part of our life right now. Exactly. It's like coming with me in these trips.
It's like we're in a trouble now. You mean there's
massage gun. Yeah, so I love it. I don't know what brand it is. I went on Amazon. It was like $100, had a ton of good reviews, and that was the one I got. This is pretty much how Pat Flynn operates. Meow, I'm gonna answer this very quickly. Meow says, can you guys comment on your views of Trinity and divine simplicity? Not in this short of time. No, it's an enormous, but I will say this. Go listen to a recent podcast with John DeRosa. I'll try and link it underneath, where he interviews James Dolezal. James Dolezal has 2 really great books on divine simplicity. He's a Protestant philosopher, and he actually borrows a lot of thoughts and resources from Bernard Lonergan, who I think was excellent on this. So if you want like the thick account of one of the best views on to show the harmony between simplicity and Trinity, Lonergan Systematics. But that is a big, thick, tough book. If you want
Yep.
the Spark Notes, go listen to the conversation with Dolezal and John DeRosa on the Classical Theism podcast, and you'll essentially kind of have how I think about this.
Yep. Cool.
All right,
Hey, can I just jump back to
grab
on the previous side? This is the end of a string of comments that Xander made that I thought were pretty good. He talked about how, in earlier comments, he got to a 300% body weight deadlift, right? And he said that it was kind of a major factor in some injuries and stuff like that. I got there, like, I think I was like 43, 42 when I did it. And then said, that's it. That was the last time I deadlifted ever. I was like, I'm not doing it again. I got out. But anyway, the point he makes here is, another problem is that people just train balls to the wall as opposed to cycling and long-term training. Okay. Exactly. I'm not against the barbell. I'm all for the barbell, right? Age and stage has a lot to do with it, and other things going on in your life and how you use it. And that's why I do think if you're going to train barbell on the 3 power lifts, go get K Black's Tactical Barbell. Go get that book, right? Don't get my book from the Tactical Barbell series, right? I mean, maybe as a second purchase, but get K Black's original Tactical Barbell, and he's going to give you this very sensible, like, how not to get wrecked using a barbell, long-term progress, right? Program in there. So I think if you're going to do it, sort of like, Joe DeFranco once said, I know meatheads are going to bench press no matter what, so I want them to do it right. So kind of like a safe sex approach, right? So if you're going to use the barbell, and I know you are, right? I know what you kids do on the weekends, right? Then yeah, go get K Black's book. It's excellent, and it will give you a good, sensible way long term to do it without getting wrecked.
Well, your fitness book was published with that company, right?
It was basically published with K Black's endorsement.
Okay.
Right. It's like he let me use the Tactical Barbell like brand on the book. Right. Like, I mean, like, Tactical Barbell status as a company is an interesting thing. Right? Okay. But so because basically it's seen it, he has a line of, I guess he has 3 books now, and mine would be like the 4th in that line. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. So mine is Tactical Barbell for old guys, right?
Yeah, that's good. All right. Let's see if we can squeeze in 1 or 2 more here.
Yeah.
Here's a kind of one that's we're not used to dealing with. Jared says, hello, guys. I just want to ask, how do I know if I'm ready to enter the dating world? Oh, boy.
Are you like 9 years old? No. You know what I mean? But other than that, I mean, here's the thing. I think this all gets overcomplicated, right? So you're set up to do this, right? So if there are girls you like, go talk to those girls, right? And make sensible decisions thereon. I just wouldn't overcomplicate. I wouldn't worry about whether I mean, assuming you're like of an appropriate age, you're not like 9, right? Okay, you're a grown adult or grown-ish, right? And it depends what you mean by dating too. Okay, but like with my own kids, I don't overcomplicate this. I'm like, you should talk to people, right? Okay, that talk to girls that you find attractive. That's perfectly fine, right? And they're beyond that, make good, sensible decisions. But do note, like, how many people are on the planet right now? Like 6 billion, 7 billion, whatever it is.
It's a lot of people.
Like, there's 6 or 7 billion people on this planet, and the vast majority of them will be able to achieve a lifelong mate, right? Okay, or will be on a track to do that. So, like, trust me, you'll be able to pull this off, and I just don't think it's all that complicated, right?
Yeah. I get nervous answering stuff like this. I teach confirmation, so I'm with high school students, and it got brought up in small group last night. And look, the first girl I asked out in the 5th grade gave me a hard rejection.
Yeah.
Still, I mean, that's why I started working out, right, Jim? So that's why I grew my hair out, learned to play the guitar.
Exactly.
And I was just such a dolt for so many years. So it's like one of those things, like, now look, things have worked out, I think, marvelously. I've got a beautiful wife. I think I have now a proper understanding of marriage, which I did not when we first got married either. I mean, it was kind of a joke originally. So I'm a man who's gone through.
Reasons for our actions are often only retrospectively available to us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, let's stay on divine simplicity.
Yeah. No, I mean, and the thing too is, like, I didn't make like some like great conscious decision to date my wife. It wasn't like a calculated decision. I didn't really make a terribly calculated decision to marry her, right? It like went off like a bomb, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think most people you talk to, like who have like really good relationships, like it wasn't where there was like this conscious calculated decision, right? To like go out and date and now go find the right person. I had a list of attributes to find and this person fit. You know, this is love. This is eros, man. There's going to be a level of uncontrol to this, right?
But is it agape, baby?
Yeah, you
But
know what I mean. You know, well, eros first, maybe agape comes, right? Okay,
yeah,
you know what I mean. But like, you know what I mean. So I just think like I see this from a lot from young people. It's like there's so much consternation over like dating, doing it right, all this. Like, look, it's not that complicated. You are set up to do this. Go talk to girls, right?
dude,
You know?
dude. We need to have like a Dr. Jim is Dr. Phil segment on this show. This is
Right.
profound.
Yeah.
I wish I had this advice when I was young,
Yeah.
man.
Go talk to girls.
Before not that anybody's interested, I'll share a story anyways. Before I met Christine, like I had a series of just pretty bad relationships with a lot of eros, right?
Yeah,
But like
yeah.
no agape.
Yeah.
And I actually had sworn off women. I said I'm just gonna live a life of celibacy. I wasn't even religious at the time.
Yeah.
It's like I'm done with this. And Christine walks into the gym, and of course I can't handle myself. And she'll tell the story in a lot more funny and probably true way than I will. But I essentially like she was writing for a newspaper at the time, a local newspaper, and about fitness. I'm like, I can tell you about that. I can tell you about that. You want to interview me? And we went out and to dinner, and the interview never happened, and we started dating, and then got married, and here we are. So it's just kind of this thing that just happened, right? Mm-hmm.
I mean, before I met Jen, marriage was not really on my radar either, right? I mean, like, I had a buddy, one of my roommates in grad school. Like, our basic plan was just to like find a way to get away with getting a PhD, and then find like a community college job on like the Gulf Coast, so we could like, you know, like live in a trailer and fish and like hit on single moms at the community college, right? I mean, like that was the plan, right? And then suddenly, man. So I always say like then Jen happened to me, right? Like I didn't choose her. It wasn't a plot. I wasn't out looking for the right girl, right? Like I was like pretty comfortable. Like, yeah, maybe bachelorhood's gonna be the way to go.
Living in a trailer, hitting on single moms.
At the community. It was discussed. Like,
is this when you were eating a lot of Sonic back then too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. This would have been like, what would this be? This would have been like 99, 2000. So I'm like 24, right? Okay. And a buddy of mine, that was kind of the plan. Can we get away with getting a PhD? And then we were gonna like try to see if we could get like, you know, like tech school jobs teaching logic in like Mobile, Alabama, live in a trailer, go fishing, right? We called it the Jimmy Buffett plan, right? Right. Okay. And so, and that was like kind of that was where I was. And then I met this woman, like went off like an atomic bomb in my life, right? Mm-hmm. And changed everything. But it wasn't like where I was out like trying to find the perfect girl, right? And it wasn't where I was out like I had some plot or I made some decision to get into the dating world, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
This human being showed up and like changed everything. Right. I think you had a similar thing there. It's
similar, man. I had
the whole
sworn it off. Done.
Yeah.
I said I was done with it. Done with it. I'm just going to do my business and my philosophy, and I'm done with it. And then then Christine walked into the gym, and that was that. And
you didn't necessarily get a vote in that, did you? Right? No, right? You know, so and a lot of the people I know that have had like really great relationships and marriages, like that's how it went. It wasn't this calculated thing, you know.
Yeah, good stuff, man. All right, we're at the hour. It's up to you, Jim, if you want to do one more or close this out.
No, I'm good. I need to eat.
All right, so let's wrap up here, guys. Thank you for the great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get through them all, but you're always welcome to resubmit them next time. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, Philosophy for the People, if you haven't already. As we can tell, it's interesting to see that we get a majority of sort of philosophy related questions now. I tried to pick out some of the fitness ones. So if you dig that type of stuff, definitely subscribe to our philosophy channel. Check out the recent combo I had with Mike Matthews over at Muscle for Life. I'll give him a plug, and over at the Byzantine Scotist. And we got Aristotle happening over at Philosophy for the People, and
go check it out.
Good stuff. So we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all the goodness.